I want to tell you about Farm Stew today. It's a very strange name, and people are wondering where did it come from. You'll hear before the end. And I got involved with it about 2 years ago when I was working with Pat Arabito on the ASI picture rolls. I did the writing of the health talks, and Pat was my editor. And I had lessons all written, and somebody called me that was from ASI, and they said, there's a lady here who does some stuff with gardening. She really sounds impressive. Would you like to have a lesson on gardening? I said, yeah, I can bump first aid out of my lessons. That would be fine. Gardening would make better sense. And so that was actually 2 years ago in April that I was introduced to Joy Kauffman. She's the one who started Farm Stew, and she's the president of it. And I have been doing health education. I'm an RN with a master's in health ed, and I've been doing health ed for, I figure, 56 years, long time. A lot of it, long before lifestyle was even a word that was coined. And so I've worked with a lot of programs worldwide, and I find the Farm Stew is the most balanced of any of them, between the spirit of prophecy, the Bible, and and science. It's very well balanced. We have 26 lessons that we do presentation on. Every lesson has a Bible lesson in it. And we are headquartered in Africa. I'll go ahead and point that out as I go on with this. But I wanted you to know that I got into this not intending to do anything else. I had prayed after the ASI project. I had prayed, God, you know I'm old. You know I don't have a lot of energy left, but I still have some wisdom, and I'm willing to do whatever you want me to do. And I met Joy. And I've been busy ever since. About 20 hours a week I spend on Farm Stew. My husband says, another conference today? With Zoom, it's very easy to have conferences every day. Okay, where does this? That does nothing. Okay, Pastor, this. Maybe that's backwards. Ah, there's forward. Okay, it's on the other side. I'm not accustomed to not having my computer in front of me. This is actually our text that we base all of our work on with Farm Stew. John 10:10, I have come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. And everything that we do in Farm Stew is to try to help the people at whatever they're at, and they are the poorest people in the world, to try to have them have a more abundant existence. This is the first part of that text, which you don't hear sometimes, and it is the thief that does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. We're in a great controversy, and this is actually a play out of the great controversy and what we see all the time with the terrible poverty in this world. And as we go even into the different areas and villages, we see where Satan has done what he can to disrupt people's lives, and we come and try to help people put those lives together. The goal for us is to reach the very poorest of the poor in the world. That would be Asia and Africa. Our pilot program is, we're 4 years old. Our mission is 4 years old. And actually it was 4 years old. It'll be 5 years old this summer. And our target is right now in the part of Africa where food security is the least, where the people are really starving. And right now, if you've heard on the news, there's swarms of locusts coming into this area. They just hit the area where we are actually centered this last week. And they go through the land. If you haven't seen it, check on your internet or just look and see what they, because the swarms of locusts, people can hardly take a breath. They can hardly even open their mouth and talk because the locusts are just coming thick through their area, millions of them. And so these are the ones that we're particularly worried, concerned with. These little children are not just a picture. When I went with Joy to Africa last fall, and this is what we saw day after day. I have a hard time with this because these kids are starving. This little boy in the middle, his legs actually have edema in them. And he probably has worms in his little belly as well. So he's got the belly from the starvation and the belly from the worms. The other little boys look, they probably just have worms, but they're also very low on their nutrients because the worms eat the nutrients. This is showing the kids who are stunted. I have 2 dolls out on the table that I brought in to show you. These are my illustration of a stunted child and one that's normal. The stunted child looks normal, except they're tiny. And so that you can't really tell their age, but the kids who get up on this picture, this is a World Health Organization picture, these kids are supposed to be, for their normal height, would be at that line. Instead, they all look like normal kids. They look like normal 7-year-olds, but they're actually 9 years old. And so this is from chronic starvation. We see this in California when we have people come from south of the border. Quite often when they come over, they're short. We have a lot of people who immigrate who are actually quite short. And then they have kids, and the kids are whole head taller. And then they have grandkids, and they're even taller because of the nutrition. So when they come in and people are really stunted, it's because they have had not enough nutrition along the way to grow properly. And this is why. This is very common food in Africa, and even to have yellow corn is good. Most of the time they're growing white maize now. It's not the indigenous crop of Africa. They had millet. They had a lot of good quality grains. I did a study recently, just looked at the grain qualities, and rice and maize are the two worst as far as the big variety of grains. They are the ones with the least amount of nutrients compared to the others. And what are the people eating? They're eating white rice and white corn. And many times that is the meal. When the mothers have maybe one pot in their little kitchen, they cook one food, and quite often that's what is, or cassava. And I have a sample basket that I'll have back on the table. You can look at afterwards. This basket has in it cassava, plantains, sweet potatoes, and white corn, and white potatoes. So when you have a meal of this, it's all white. Everything inside of here is white. It's good for energy, but it's not good for basic nutrition because it doesn't have all the vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals that you need to be healthy. And no matter where we ate, whether we ate in some really interesting little restaurants, I had to really swallow hard to go in some of the little places where we ate because I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to get so sick. But I never did. I was well protected. Anyway, when we'd go into restaurants, what we could get would be cassava or white rice or beans. And often there were no other vegetables, nothing available. It is just the way people eat. So these little children, and if you look at these kids, I don't know if you can see it on the screen or not. These kids here have red hair. See this? Black kids are supposed to have black hair. These kids have red hair because of malnutrition. And when we do testing on them, we take a test on their little arms right up here. And if it's too skinny, then we know how malnourished they are. You can tell by the measurement on the kids' arms. It doesn't have anything to do with age. It has more to do with just the measurement itself. Farm Stew started in 2015. Its headquarters is Illinois. We have 30 national workers. All of our workers are national, are indigenous people. We have Joy, who's our president, and her secretary, and those are the only two who are American. The rest of us are all volunteers that work with the program. So far, we've had, in the 5.5 years we've been in working, we've had 80,000 people who have gone through our classes. That's phenomenal for such a small team. But I should say 80,000 education days, or attendees. And we have been in 800 villages so far. And so we are making progress, even though we're small in numbers. We have large groups who come to hear us. When you go in a village, you'll have from 25 to 50 people. And our teams usually go in at least 2 villages a day, and they work 5 days a week. So we really are seeing a great number of people. Now, I'm going to tell you this story about Joy. And she's the one who is our president. And I really feel about her that she's a modern-day child who was prepared for the service. Just like as Queen Esther was prepared, she came for such a time as this. I think Joy is that kind of person. We know that Daniel actually was prepared in his home for what he was going through in the court. And so Joy, I think, has been prepared from the beginning, not realizing it, but now looking back and putting it all together. When I tried putting this talk together, she went through her scrapbook for me. She goes, Dawna, I didn't realize as much as you're pointing out that there's been a step and step and step and step that have led me to doing what I'm doing. And this is why I wanted the young people to hear this today, because you kids will not know what God really has intended for you unless you pay attention and you listen to Him day after day and allow Him to guide you. She was born in a Seventh-day Adventist hospital. She said her mother knew nothing further about Adventists except the delivery. She was told nothing about Adventists, and she did nothing about except that they had a very good hospital. And she was named Joy, which is a very appropriate name for her. At the age of 5, she was eating a hot dog one day, and somebody said to her, "Do you know what you're eating?" They were trying to be snooty. "You are eating a dead pig that's all been ground up." And it has a lot of icky fat in it called lard. And they put extra fat in there so that when you put it on the barbecue, it snaps and crackles. And Joy said, no, that's not what I'm eating. And she went home and she said to her, what was in the hot dog? And her mother said, well, that's pork. Well, what's pork? It's a pig. I ate a dead pig? Yes. She was appalled. She was a little tiny girl, but she would never touch another hot dog. Okay, then she and her brother and sister would go every summer to her grandparents' farm at Farmland, Indiana. That was the name of their little town. And they had everything. They had pigs, they had rabbits, they had horses, they had cows, they had chickens, and they always had kittens. And so they would love it. They would go and spend time at the farm every summer, and she helped her grandma snap beans and shell peas, and they made applesauce, and they made tomato juice, and it was wonderful. They had a big cellar where they stored their food, and she realized that people could actually take care of themselves and be self-sustaining. So that was one of her lessons that she learned. And as you see, as I go through the progress of, and the philosophy of Farm Stew, you can see where every one of these things had to do with what we're doing today. Because she realized families could take care of herself. And in the beginning, she realized that she didn't want to eat an animal. Why would she eat an animal? So at the age of, whoops, I went one too many. Okay, I guess I'm used to a screen where I see my next slide up here and telling me where I'm coming from, and I haven't given this talk this way before, so you'll have to forgive me a minute. So farming is one of the things that we do with our the F in Farm Stew is for farming, and that is what we do with people. We go in and many times they're actually rural farmers, but maybe they raise cassava, maybe they raise corn, but they don't have a garden. And they can hardly afford the seed. So Farm Stew goes in. Last year when I went with Joy to Africa, we took a big suitcase full of nothing but seeds in packages. They were donated to us. And we distributed them to our farmers. And then we sell soybeans. Give them soybeans. We give them sprouts that are all ready to plant into the ground. And we give them good quality that they can't buy anywhere else, so that what they grow is really good quality crop. And we try to help them be winners. One of the things everybody does that has to be a Farm Stew family, they have to have a compost pile, and then when we teach them to do their gardens, they have to follow our rules. So they have to plant their soybeans a certain place, a certain distance apart, their rows have to be a certain size, and by having them absolutely have to follow the rules, it teaches discipline, but it also teaches the value of having things be in order. So this is one of the gardens, and you can see that they have thick mulch. They don't have, most of these people have to hand water their gardens. They have to carry their water to water their gardens. So they get the soil wet, they plant their seed, and then they put this thick mulch on it. And sometimes the mulch is like this, 9 inches deep, 10 inches deep, sometimes almost a foot deep. As the plants grow, they just keep adding. And it's big, thick, it's not just thin little pieces of mulch, it's actually twigs. So this is Joy at the age of 9. She had loved all the animals at her grandparents' farm, and she made the announcement one day, I am not eating any more animals. And her family didn't believe her. They thought it passed. No, she would not, and she became vegetarian at the age of 9, and she stuck to it. She has not eaten an animal since the age of 9. So this was one more step, because what we do in Farm Stew is we teach a plant-based diet. We don't talk much about meat. It comes up once in a while. We'll say a little thing like, you'd rather do this because the meat has disease. If you're going to talk about fat, it has fat in it that's harmful. We don't ever mention eggs one way or the other, because sometimes when you're starvation, those things are necessary. It's just if you can have a chicken. Most of them don't even have chickens because they can't even afford the feed for the chickens. And so most people don't even have those. But we are totally plant-based in our program, and we're totally plant-based in what we're teaching, and we have plenty of science to back us up, plenty of spirit of prophecy, and plenty in the Bible. So we teach the people to use their local foods. Uganda is where our headquarters is, and it's a marvelous country. I would be happy living in Uganda, because they have rainy season twice a year. And when they don't have that rainy season come over for a week or two, they think they have a drought. They don't know what real drought is yet. But they've done pretty well. And Uganda is really well situated. It's on the equator. But they can actually run 2 crops. So they can have crops going all the time in their gardens. They don't have to have a blank time. One crop's finished, they put in another crop. This is a jackfruit, which is actually becoming popular even here in the United States. And we go in, we teach them that you can have jackfruit in 3 ways. You can have it green, which is how they sell it in the United States here in cans. You can buy green jackfruit, and you use it like a meat substitute. You can do it in barbecue, you can do all kinds of things with it. It has a little bit of texture that seems to be a little bit meat-like. And you can serve it ripe as a fruit, which is the way they usually eat it, but there's a thought in their culture that fruit is dangerous for children. And so here they have this ripe and growing. One of these trees will grow between 1,000 to 3,000 pounds of fruit every year. That's huge. And they're pretty much, you drop a seed in the ground in Uganda and it grows. You can get an avocado tree or a mango, or they're prolific. But they haven't known that they should eat them. So part of what we are doing is trying to educate them about what they have available, which is plenty, actually. And one of the things that we totally encourage is greens. Africans are known for eating a lot of greens, but they're going to Western diet, or they're so poor they don't worry about the greens. They just they get in the habit of eating these white foods, and they're happy with just eating the white foods. They don't have the taste buds for the other. So we encourage them to eat some kind of greens every single day, and something that's orange all the way through every single day. They can grow squash quite easily. So those two, if we can just get those in the diet, in addition to what they're eating, their children's health will improve considerably. I'll go on with that in a minute. So this is what they can grow in their gardens. And so this is actually some from the gardens that they can grow, and these things all grow beautifully, from tomatoes through squash or eggplant. They all grow very well in their soils. So it's just unthinkable to me that the people have so much poverty and so much pain when they have so much available that somebody just needs to come and show them. And when they go through it, you can go on our website. There's a gal by the name of Nora that we just listed about a month ago that we met when we were there last fall. She was just singing, literally. She'd made up a song about farm stew. We're a farm stew home. Everybody knows when they walk past our home, we're a farm stew home. And she just was so poetic in how she explained it. She goes, my husband is so much happier. He comes home, he goes, how did you learn this? I went to farm stew today. He asked me on Tuesday mornings, do you have farm stew today? Good, be sure you go. Because it's made a difference in the lives of the families. When Joy was all the way through her growing up years, she dreamed of playing volleyball professionally, or at least in college. And her sister was into volleyball, so the whole family was dreaming of this volleyball. And so she practiced a great deal. And she got into the team in her, I don't know if it's her sophomore year in high school, and she was in her junior year, and she played well. And I have to tell you, I kept seeing pictures about stunting, and I kept seeing her in the pictures, and finally I said, boy, a lot of those people are stunted, aren't they, Joy? Well, we worked together a whole year. We hadn't met each other. We only saw each other on Zoom. She starts laughing. She goes, Donna, I'm over 5'10". And so everybody looks stunted. So when I get together with her, I'm stunted. But she was a big girl, and she still says her grandparents kept worrying about her nutrition. She's 5'10", playing volleyball, and they're worried about her nutrition. So she actually went into studying nutrition because of the concern about her being a vegetarian. So she played her sophomore year, her junior year, and then the summer between junior and senior year in high school, she had signed up for a Christian. She'd always been Christian in some form. She was mostly Catholic as a kid. But she signed up for a Christian camp on volleyball. And she had a very nasty coach. She says she thinks she hated girls. And the coach told him, okay, 9 weeks this summer are mine. You're going to be here every single day practicing, because she would win. She was known for her winning the championships around the area. But she was hard on her girls. And she said, you have to be here. And Joy said, I can't be. I've already signed up for 1 week of a camp, and it's a volleyball camp. You be here, because I'm the one in charge, and you be here. Well, Joy didn't go. She went to the summer camp. When she came back, that coach would not let her play properly the whole entire senior year. She said, Donna, I never once got a really good position. I was never allowed in the back row anymore. She said, and mostly I sat on the seat. The whole year, that teacher punished her for the fact that she had taken off that 1 week, ignoring her talents and her abilities. So she came up with the idea that your attitude in life makes a lot of difference, which is the A in farm stew, because that teacher was so nasty and had such a nasty attitude that she had to deal with. But the other thing is that Joy learned to deal with people who are unhappy with what she's doing. She has a husband who's still Mennonite and is very much opposed to what she does. He is very much opposed to her baptism. In fact, she thought that if she was away from home at all. Before that, her husband was actually going to take the children and run. So it's been very difficult. He gives her trouble all the time, but she says just having to deal with that coach is one of the things that was a negative thing for her, but now that she has grown up, she can look backwards and she knows that that was a positive for her. By the way, you guys who are using your phones, you're not going to get any kind of blessing out of this. Okay, then she went, after high school, she graduated and she went off to Mexico with a group of her high school friends who were a Christian group, went off to do a mission. And she played basketball down there, and she said the third day she sprained her ankle very badly, and she couldn't do anything but sit under a tree. And the kids were enthralled with coming and talking to her. She's very vivacious, and she practiced her Spanish on them. And they got such a kick out of her practicing Spanish, so they would come day by day. Well, one day this girl came with the little baby, and the child had a pacifier in its mouth. And so Joy was trying to make the little boy laugh, and so she made the baby laugh, and the pacifier fell out and went rolling through the dirt. And the sister picked it up and popped it right back in the mouth. And Joy was appalled, and so the next day she said to the children, "You all need to bring some water, and I'm going to teach you how to wash your hands, and we're going to talk about germs." And so she said this was her beginning of hygiene and sanitation, that she realized how important it was for people to have water and to have good hygiene, and that's part of our Farm Stew program too. This is a very horrible statistic. 1 out of 8 people in this world doesn't have water properly. It's either contaminated or they simply don't have it available, have to walk miles. When Hans and I were in Nairobi, the women would go down to the river, and they would have to actually dig it and dig down and make a hole in order to get the water for the day to take back. And some of them had to walk up to 5 miles to carry their water. It's almost impossible for us to even fathom. I don't even know how they do it. I don't even know how they do it. It was so sad. One day we were actually, when we were in Nairobi, we were under a tree having Sabbath school, having church with about 30 other people under this big tree. And here the women are walking with their 5-gallon buckets, either on their heads or backs or carrying. And there were burros grazing. And it just was beyond me. So water is one of the big things. I don't know, I'm not technically savvy enough to get my pictures off of WhatsApp and Messenger. And so I wasn't able to bring the pictures today because last week, Farm Stew actually put in our first well. It's been our goal. and villages have to be Farm Stew certified, which means 80% of the village has to be Farm Stew trained. And so when they get there, then we'll consider their village for a well. This village that we went to and was actually when I got to visit and watch a training in when I was there. And those women, nobody talked about the water problem. We asked for water to wash hands. They brought it. They all looked neat and tidy, like they just took their clothes out of the dryer, and they all looked great. Women were all in good, nice dresses, and it turned out they were walking 3 miles every day to get their water. They had a well, and it had gone defunct, and due to lack of maintenance. And so what we have done is we've paired with 2 other water facilities. One is from the United States, and one actually is the training group right there. The drilling group right there, and we were going to buy our own drilling rig, which was this little thing up here. When I found out on the internet, I was so excited. For $27,000, you can buy your own little rig. And we found out that we are too small to do that. So we had to go with other ministries. And they're both Christian ministries, and it's working really nicely because one of the ministries, Life Water, is actually helping to pay a little bit for each well. The wells are $4,000 to $5,000, and they're actually helping us with those, which I think is marvelous. And that is one of the blessings of Joy working with other ministries all through the years. She's not afraid to work with other ministries. And she tells them right up front, you can't drill on Sabbath. So they drill the first well, and then they're ready to drill the second, and we're holding our breath. What are they going to do? Are they going to go? Are they going to honor us? Nope, they took Sabbath off. So it's a really good witness. And when we have meetings with them, we always close with prayer. And so we're able to benefit from their expertise, and we're planning on 50 wells this year. So we're looking for sponsors for 50 wells for the year, and so far we put in 2. And I have these 2 pictures that I wanted so much to put because the women are just dancing, and hooting the African hoot. I don't know what they call it, but I couldn't get the picture on here to show you. This is when it happened when Joy had the sprained ankle and was in Mexico. This is the scaffolding they were working on doing the painting. And she said, as I sat there, I kept thinking, this doesn't make any sense. The gringos are all doing the work, and all the able-bodied men from the village are sitting around on the bottom. Why aren't they all up there working with the gringos? Because they call the Americans the gringos. So that became part of our philosophy. And you'll see on the banner in the hall, it talks about the fact that we do not help people, we do not give to people without them helping themselves. And so our goal is to get in there and teach these people to take care of themselves. We don't do any handouts. In fact, Joy went up to South Sudan to do something, and they have just hundreds of people, NGOs, giving out food, giving out this. And one of the ladies said to her at a meeting that she went to, "You'll never get a penny because you don't give people things." And Joy said, "But we give them knowledge, and we give them the ability to work." And we did. The Swiss embassy from there gave us an excellent, what do you call it? Anyway, it's like a stipend. And we were able to go in and completely start a whole new farm stew in that country because of that Swiss embassy helping us. So somebody saw the value. So, I have the quote here. "You may give to the poor and injure them because you teach them to be dependent." Does that sound like our country? Instead teach them to support themselves. This will be true help. The needy must be placed in positions where they can help themselves. So that's the whole philosophy of Farm Stew. What can we do to help these people help themselves? E is enterprise, and we try to get people many people can't even afford the uniforms for their children, so the kids don't get to go to school because they have no cash, they have no money. And so we try to teach enterprise. This one is a very simple one, but the man was so thrilled when he did it. We have something called a tippy tap, and I'll show that to you in a minute, where they can wash their hands. And so it's just some sticks with a bottle on it and a rope and a pedal. And you push the pedal down, and it tips the bottle, and you get 40 cc's of water, and that water then helps you wash your hands. So they can put them outside their bathrooms, outside their kitchen, and that's part of becoming a Farm Stew family. You have to have a tippy tap. So this man made them, and then somebody stole them. He made them again, somebody stole them. He said, okay, so there's an opportunity for business here. Obviously, people want tippy taps. And so he started making tippy taps, and he makes them and sells them for 83 cents, and he is thrilled because his kids now have money for uniforms, and he actually has money for more food. It's interesting. When Joy went off to college, she went to Virginia Tech. She got a full scholarship for her volleyball playing, and you can see her leaping here where the arrow is. She was a fit lady. Her vegetarianism didn't hurt her a bit. And so she was able to play there. She started out taking dietetics, and she was going to be a dietitian. And then she said one day her teacher said, "Now when we get to soda pop and we're dealing with people with soda pop, just get them off of the stuff with the sugar. It's okay if they drink the sugarless." And Joy dropped the class. She said, "I do not want to be a dietitian with this philosophy. I can't do this." So she took something called international nutrition, and because of her different mission trips as a kid and as a young woman, she knew that she was wanting to do international work. When I was up there with her, I went north in Uganda to this refugee camp, and there's 85,000 people there from Sudan in that camp. And they're actually very particular because I was on the campground. They had to go through special permission to let me even go onto that campground. They're very protective of the refugees, that people don't get in that could cause some more difficulty for them. And anyway, this was our team here in the green shirts, and then the ladies that are the volunteers. And we ended up after this session, and we had 5 days training. We stayed in a guest house up there. And we had where the power worked part of the time and the water worked part of the time. And we worked together all the time, and they learned the basics. And so these volunteers were trained in, and then we hired 2 of them afterwards to be part of the team that stayed back there. This is our classrooms. We've been in mosques. We've been in, most we were under trees. Most of the time we're under trees just in the villages. And then they went into they have a ladies' prison there. And I got to visit that while I was there. And they went in and they did the Farm Stew nutrition program, which is just teaching people to eat rainbow foods. And they changed the menu for the prison, and they have huge gardens there now. This is our rainbow, our little theme picture that we developed. And we use this for teaching, and we do really promote the rainbow colors in the beans, the rainbow colors in the vegetables, in the fruits, and just at least have half of your plate be colorful. And we have a lot of Americans who could actually learn this principle. This is part of what they do. They chop up what vegetables are available or what they actually have in their gardens already, and then they each little village kind of does their own whatever. We have some pretty interesting ones, depending on how artistic the person is that puts the food on the plate. When Joy was in college, she was on a spring vacation, and she woke up one night, and she... where did I put my Bible? Okay, I came up here with the Bible. I left it on the pew. Thank you. She had a dream, and not a dream, she heard a voice. She heard a voice, and it said, read Isaiah 58. And she thought about it a little while and tried to go back to sleep. She couldn't go back to sleep. And she said the voice came again, read Isaiah 58. So she goes, well, what's Isaiah 58? I've never heard of that book. And she thought it was a book that somebody had written that you could just read. And then finally she thought, this is really strange. I can't believe God would give me a message like that. But she actually then got up. She always took a Bible with her, but she said that religion was very confusing to her. She was raised Catholic. She was Pentecostal for a while. She studied Isaiah 58, and at the end of Isaiah 58, it talks about, if you keep the Sabbath, I'll bless you. She didn't know for sure what the Sabbath meant, so she got into Messianic Judaism, and she didn't quite understand it. She said it never made sense that the law is done away with, but why did Jesus have to die if the law was done away with? She said, it was always in my head. She's a very brilliant lady, and she's a deep thinker, and she decided she wanted to be a preacher when she was actually pretty young, and she actually does a lot of preaching. So Isaiah 58, if you're not real familiar with it, I suggest you go home and take a good look at it, because it's really, this is what Mrs. White said, that's our message for today. She got up and she looked it up, and she looked at the front of her Bible to see if Isaiah was even in there. Sure enough, it was there. She couldn't believe she carried it around all those years and never even knew that book was there. In the first 4 or 5 verses, the people are saying, why don't you bless us more? We've been fasting and we pray and we do what we're supposed to do, but it's like God doesn't pay any attention to us. And then God replies, your days of fasting and prayer are filled with quarreling and strife. You even strike each other with your fists. You can't act like this and expect me to listen to you and answer your prayers. Is this the kind of fasting and praying that I'm pleased with? For a man to deny himself... No, this is the fasting and praying that I'm pleased with. For a man to deny himself food and drink and humble himself, only to get up and act... for him to get up and only act like this in the way that you do? Is it a matter of not bowing down in prayer and sitting in sackcloth and ashes? Is this what you call a day of fasting and prayer, a day acceptable to the Lord? I guess now maybe God would say, do you go to church all the time and then you cheat other people and you fight? And then this is what God says in verse 6. Let me tell you the kind of fast that is acceptable to me. It is to remove the chains of injustice, to untie the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, to lift the spirit of those who are brokenhearted. This is totally farm stew. And this is where she got her inspiration. Share your food with the hungry, open your house to the poor travelers who have nowhere to stay. Give clothes to those who have nothing, and don't forget the needy members of your own family. I know your church has a great program where you make up the clothes for those who have nothing. And believe me, those kids, many of them have nothing. If you do this, my light will shine on you like the morning sun, and healing will be quickly evident. I will go before you, and my glory will be your rear guard. And this is what we find in Farm Stew. It's bathed in prayer. And God really is our rear guard. I have seen so many miracles. That's why I work with them. So this is the summary here that Mrs. White says, this whole chapter of Isaiah is to be regarded as a message for this time, to be given over and over again. This should be our own philosophy. And for you kids who are young, this is a philosophy that you should think about in your daily life, because Joy started out at the age of 5 already learning things that were serving God. And in your own lives, you don't have any idea probably how many times you've done things or are doing things that determine your future. And whether you're in line with God, or you're the first part of this verse here, where you're out of line, will depend on how good your life will be in the end and whether it will actually serve God. So you need to evaluate along the way, what decisions am I making? What has happened in my life that will guide the way in the direction that I go? When she was out of school, she went down to Brazil. There was Hurricane Mitch had really destroyed a lot of that area in Honduras and so on. And she tried to help for, I think she was down there 3 months. She lived in a shanty town, so she really lived with the poor. And she realized how important the water and the food and the sanitation were, and that they had no opportunity. They didn't have the freedom to do what they wanted because they were so lacking. And that's when she decided she wanted to have some kind of ministry to deal with these people. This is a tippy tap. And it's just a gallon jug strung up on a pole. And you step on it, and it gives you 40 cc's of water. That's enough to get your hands wet. You step on it again, 40 cc's to rinse your hands, and another 40 to get them really clean. And then you air dry. When she was finished with college, her sister had some medical problems and wanted her to come take care of her in Washington, D.C. So she went there, and she had more training than God did for her to get her ready for farm stew. Because she got a government position. First, she worked as an aide at a congressional aide. This was during the Clinton years. She worked as a congressional aide, and then she worked in the federal program, and she was the one who read the grants. And so she learned what a person is looking for. She goes, "Oh, Dawna, I was really popular because we gave away millions in our department. So people were always wanting to get a little friendly with us so that they could get the grant money." And so she read the grants. Well, that's the perfect for a farm stew, because now she can write grants. She can sit down and write a grant as though it's nothing. And most organizations are desperately looking for grant writers because it's a very complicated process. But Joy can whip them out like you can't believe. During that time they were so poor, she got together with her husband, Mac, and he had pretty much was one of those guys, decided when he met her he wanted to marry her. He had a very big crush on her. And so they lived in what's called the hood, which she tells me is the ghetto. She said, "I learned a lot of bad language and a lot of bad habits while we lived there." She said, when I look back, I can't believe how low I sunk. But and they were marching, they were activists and politically active, and that was their life for the time that they lived there. And then they got married, they had a couple girls, they moved to Indiana and back into Mennonite country, so they lived in a Mennonite town, and they raised their 2 girls. And her husband decided both of them wanted to be preachers and pastors. And so he wanted to go to a seminary in Ireland. And while she was there, she tried to homeschool her kids, which just drove her crazy because she's very outgoing, wants to be with the people all the time. And so she was not a very good candidate for homeschooling. And her youngest daughter, Nora, gave her a great deal of difficulty because she didn't learn. She simply could not be taught. And Joy had met this woman here, the one in the blonde. Her name is Cherry. She was from the same town as Joy, and they had met and they clicked really well, but then Joy went off to Ireland and didn't have any contact with her. When Joy came back to Princeton is the name of the town, when she came back, she went to a cooking school put on by the Adventist Church, and there was Cherry. And she was so glad to connect with her again. And Cherry was just sympathetic and helped her. And Cherry finally said to her one day, "You have so much problem with your daughter and with her learning. I know somebody that can help. There's a little Adventist church school an hour away, but the teacher has special ed training. And why don't we at least go over there?" And Joy said she just threw up her hands. She thought Cherry was a little odd because of her weird beliefs, and she really thought she was odd because she was so humble. And she just didn't get out there, and Joy was a competer. She didn't get out and compete in life. She was just really a humble lady. And she said, I actually thought she was a little simple. And especially to homeschool kids, you have to be really simple to come up with a silly idea like that. But she and Cherry got along. So finally Cherry said, "This is the girl who couldn't learn." And so she said, "Come and at least go meet the teacher." So she went and met the teacher, and Joy knew immediately that was the answer for her daughter. So she bought a 12-seat van, almost lost her husband over that one, and for 5 years, they bused to that little church school 1 hour one way. So that was a 2-hour trip every day for those kids to go to church school, and there were only 7 kids in the church school. It was a teeny little group. 2 of them were Cherry's kids, 2 of them were Joy's kids. They picked up one other one, so that a town that actually had the school only had 2 kids in that school. And they couldn't, the conference wouldn't let them have a school with less than 8 children, so they signed up a phantom child, and somebody paid tuition every month on the phantom child, so that they would have, in their records, it would show they had 8 kids in school. But it has totally saved Joy and her family. It has been absolutely. And Joy said, I was so leery of Adventists, I thought that I wanted nothing to do with that silly church. It just had such weird beliefs. As she said, every morning I would take the kids to school and I would stay for Bible class. Guess what that did? And then she would play with the kids during recess, and then she'd go home, and then Cherry would drive in the afternoon and pick the kids back up. So that's gone on for 5 years. And the pastor would come every week for one's worship, and he would have worship with the kids. And he would stay and then have a Bible study with Joy. Well, after a year, she was totally convicted and converted, and she knew she wanted to be an Adventist. So she started attending the church, and she came to understand what a wonderful rest the Sabbath is. And so R is in our Farm Stew name. So when we teach the class, we teach nightly rest, we teach weekly rest, and there's many things that are on a 7-day cycle in your body. So that's a very good one, even from a science perspective. And then we teach about the Sabbath. And just not long ago, we had 2 ladies who came to the class, and they said they'd never heard such a thing about the Sabbath. They were Sunday keepers. And the teacher said, go home and look it up for yourself. And so they went home, and they started studying the Sabbath, and they're now baptized members of an Adventist church. Okay, when Joy, the 4 years ago, actually this summer it'll be 5 years ago, she got a job with the government, with USAID. They asked her to go over and promote soy in the villages because they use their land for sugar, and they use it for tea, and they use it for coffee, but they would be much better off if they would use it for soy because they can get 2 soy crops a year out of it. With sugar cane, it's an 18-month crop. They tie up their land. And with soy, they can do it twice a year. So she went over to promote that, and she found an Adventist church because she had been attending the church in Princeton. And this was the church. I think this is the biggest church in Uganda. And she was so impressed because when she got there, some lady, her name's Lucy, she just took her as a friend, and she stayed with her the whole time, and she translated the sermon, and she translated the Sabbath school class. And Joy said she couldn't believe she was in Africa, and here was a church that was totally on time. Everybody was friendly. It was neat and clean. You can see how well kept it is. They had some English class, and they had some in their local language. The children's choir was spectacular. And they had a worldwide Sabbath school class, which she had never heard of in any church, where they were studying all over the world. They're studying the same thing. And so there was unity worldwide. And this happened to be the lesson study of the day that she was there. And this is why I talk about God protects from the rear guard, because this was one of those rear guard days. And it said, this was in the lesson study, Jeremiah 22:16. Plead the cause of the afflicted and needy, then it was well. Is not that what it means to know me, declares the Lord? So you read this over and over, and you find out it means you plead the cause, you do justice, you make sure that the people get justice, that you're doing what's right for them, for those who are needy and afflicted. And that is, everything then goes well, and then God says, this is what I declare to you, that I am your Lord. And this was like the stamp on it. I'm doing this program because this is God's stamp, and even Jeremiah. It goes right along with Isaiah. She mentioned it in the Sabbath school class. She said, I just have had this burden on my heart to start a ministry somewhere, and I am so impressed with what I see here in Uganda. She was only there 3 weeks. I'm so impressed with what I see here in Uganda. I would just like to start a team that can do some kind of work in the villages, and we can help the people. And after the class, this lady came up to her and said, I want to be your team member. And she goes, but I don't even have a team, but I'll be the first. And so she signed up to be on the team. And it turned out she has a college degree, and they call her Mama Betty. She has a college degree, and she's got a gorgeous voice. She was the choir leader in that church, and she has such a good voice that she had been a radio talk show host for years and years. And when I traveled in the car with her, we would stop at places and eat, or we'd stop and get vegetables or something along the way. Almost always somebody would say, I recognize your voice. She was national. So she was a national talk show host for all those years. And she still has a talk show on Friday afternoon, but it's from the Adventist Church, and it's beamed all over Uganda too. She before the age of 17, she already had kids. No husband, but that's just the way things work in Africa, because a girl, to have status, needs to have some man pay attention to her. And so she had three daughters, which she raised herself, and they got raised. And then slowly, she started coming up with another whole family that were kids who came to the school or came to her attention. And she's adopted all of these children. 2 of these children have AIDS. One of the children is so crippled that she needs physical therapy to loosen up her legs and help her walk properly. 2 of these children are deaf. And this little boy in the red jacket is 13 years old. All of these children have lost their homes. They have no family. They had nothing. Every one of these children was cast aside, and she's taken them all on. And so she's got 9 kids, or 8 kids she's raising. And when she showed me the church school, she said, one of the boys stood up, she goes, "See that boy? That boy isn't going to make it. Somebody needs to take care of him." And I thought, that's Betty's 9th kid. I can see it coming up. She's going to take him home. And so Joy actually helps them with their tuition, which is a pretty big burden, but that's her love for Betty. And this little boy, Betty said, he's a preacher. God gave him the gift of preaching. And so she said that big church that I showed you the picture of, he's the preacher there 1 out of 6 weeks. Every 6 weeks, he's the preacher. And so Betty said to him, "Would you have worship, please?" And he gets out this notebook, and he's got sermon after sermon. He's having a sermon he's written out in there, and he opens one of the pages up, and he gives a beautiful little worship service to us, and then the kids all sing really well because their mom's done a good job of teaching them. And you look in the backyard, it's a huge garden back there. She feeds them, all of their food comes from that garden. Every kid knows how to garden, every kid knows how to cook. Every kid can sing. Almost all of them are at the top of their class in school. She's pretty amazing. She's one of our directors. This is our other director. This is Edward. He volunteered that day also after that Sabbath school class. He was a child who had no home. He was kicked from place to place to place to place and told he was worthless. And he somehow has managed to go through college, and he's our director for the country. And he does a very nice job. He's very relaxed. He does a very good job. He talks to Joy every day. We run our whole program on the internet. We have virtually no office here at all. These are the countries where we're working now. We're adding one more. Joy's going over in April, and we're adding one more country. And there's an orphanage where we're going to be working out of that orphanage and working in that country. She went to South Sudan when I went with her. The conference president called they have a conference just the same size as us in Northern. He called all of his churches in and told them they need to send at least 2 representatives in. She came and did a 5-day training, and all churches have now been in this South Sudan have been trained in farm stew. And last week she sent a picture that she got on WhatsApp, and this was a church that was now teaching the church members. And it was sad. Everybody was so skinny. Every single member in that church looked like they couldn't make it much more without. So it's just misery after misery. But the farm stew being introduced is a blessing to the country. And then one day Joy called me and she said, "Donna, I've been gone so much from my family, and they just called and they want me to go to Cuba. And I don't want to go to Cuba. I don't have any interest in Cuba." I said, "Joy, we're going to go worldwide." I'm always telling her, we're going worldwide. She loves Africa, so she's not enthused about it like I am. I've worked worldwide. And so she said, "I don't think I should go. They've trained 800 Bible workers who now have had medical training, and they want them to do farm stew to have the garden aspect." And so she called back the next morning. She goes, "Donna, you're not going to believe this. They called me this morning. Do you know what their theme is for the 5 days? Isaiah 58. I said, "Then you have to go." And so she said, I know, I have to go." And she went, and she said it was like a holy bubble she was in the whole time. Dave Fiedler was there, and another speaker, and the 3 of them just had a lot of time to visit together and encourage each other. And we have now 2 weeks ago, we started work in Cuba. And when I talk about God giving us things, we need somebody that knows agriculture to run farm stew. And while she was there, she met a couple who had just finished a job and were in between in limbo looking for a new job, and they're our new directors. And they're both agriculture. They both graduated with degrees from college in agriculture. So this is our office. That little computer is the office for farm stew. I'm talking to her sometimes on Zoom, and she'll say, Nora will come in, Mom, you need to get off my bed. So she picks up her computer and walks in the living room. She stays in the living room a while. It's too noisy. So then she goes up to their bedroom, and her husband comes in. Joy, it's time to go to bed. You got to move. So she moves the office to another part of her house. And that's kind of how it is. Everything happens in this computer. We do all of our data. We do everything on internet. It's a phenomenal world we live in. And we are on Zoom constantly, so we can look, and we even have the Zoom with our team in Africa, so we can talk to our team from Africa sitting there at a desk. You can sit there in your pajamas if you want to, and you can have a board meeting, whatever you want, whatever it works out. So it's amazing what is able to be done. That's why we know when we say over 80,000 have gone through our training, we know that's true because every night on the internet, our trainers email in their numbers and their names, and it all goes into our database. And so we know that our data is accurate. We also started e-learning. So on the internet now we've had people from Mongolia, from Guatemala, from a lot of places in Africa. We don't even know how they found out about Farm Stew, but they've signed up for this course, and they can go through the course and become trained in how to run Farm Stew. And this, you just look on our website, farmstew.org, and you can see that. People wonder how much this has to do with the churches. A lot. Joy knows almost all the pastors. Every time we go past a place where a pastor is, we have to stop, and she visits with him. And we went to one place, and the day before we had gone to this, we'd gotten there on a Friday night, and it was way up. I'll tell you more about this afternoon. It was way up in a corner of Uganda. And we got there Friday night, and the pastor said to Joy, do you guys want to take the church service tomorrow? We thought, that's really strange. The church service is asking us. They don't even know us. We just rolled into town. And so Joy took the church service, and then we had to leave later that afternoon because we had to be somewhere else. And the next morning on a Sunday, we went past the conference office, and Joy said, well, we have to stop and see what's going on. Well, if you stopped at our conference office on a Sunday morning, what do you think you'd get? Nothing. But we stopped, and there's the president sitting in his office working, and he says, oh, Joy, I'm so glad to see you. And then they visit, and they talk, and then in the process, he says, you know, last week we had a union meeting, and they voted a vote of confidence for Farm Stew, and you're now welcome in any church. And we thought, that's why we were welcomed in the church the day before. We didn't even know. We hadn't even asked. The union had just done it. So this tells you something about the reputation of Farm Stew among the churches. And in Africa, they have total member involvement, and the members really are the ones bringing Farm Stew to the villages. So the pastor said, we love to go into a village after Farm Stew training. The people receive Bible studies readily, and we have many baptisms. Now, for you young people who are in the audience, I would like to challenge you, because Joy, when she was 5 and decided to become not eat any pork, or 7 and decided to become vegetarian, or 18 and decided to teach other people how to wash their hands and so on, all of these things were just ordinary things in her life. But she had always had, in her heart, a love for God. She didn't know how to express it. She didn't know what religion to even be involved in, but she knew that she wanted to be in tune with Jesus. And so she said, I prayed. And when I look back on my prayers, they were pretty minimal, and I really didn't know exactly what I was praying for. But she said, I know now that I am where I belong, and that God has given us this ministry, and there's no way this ministry could go the way it is without God on our rear guard, because he has led every step, and he provides people, the right people, exactly when we need them. I'm happy working because they needed a health educator with experience in international travel, and here I am, so I was fit in that little slot. We have other people who exactly fit in the slots they're needed, and this is what happened to Esther. Esther had a rough life. You know, she didn't have parents. Somehow something had happened to her parents. She had to be raised by an uncle, and we never even hear about the aunt, so we don't know anything about that. But when I looked up how old Google knows everything, and so I looked up on Google, how old was Esther when she became queen? It said based on looking at who was in power and looking at history and looking at the culture and knowing how old girls were when they got married, there's a very good chance Esther was only 13 to 15 when she got married. So I'm asking you kids sitting in the audience, what would happen if you were put in a court in 2 years or 3 years? How would you witness? What would you even know to witness? What have you been doing now that you could carry forward and you'd have the gumption to do? You have to ask yourself that, because God used young people to start this church. The oldest person was 39, who was ancient with those new people who started this church. Most of them were 17, 18, 19, 12 years old, 11 years old that started this church. And it's going to take that to keep it going. And this is, Esther was only 13 to 15. She was 19 when she went before the king and risked her life like she did. And according to history, she was 32 years old when she died. So it probably was childbirth. But she was 32 years old when she died. Same with Daniel. I've always felt sorry for Daniel being taken away from his family, but you know what? His family wasn't there after he was taken. Though everybody was hauled off somewhere. Some of them went to Babylon, some of them were taken other places, but the whole lives were disrupted. He had no idea where his family ever ended up. I have a grandma who had a twin and a bunch of brothers and sisters. Said then when she left Germany, she never heard from her family again. She has no idea what ever happened with her family. And that's how it was with Daniel. So God had actually been leading Daniel so that he was prepared in his mind what he knew, what he believed. And God made him good looking, and God made Esther good looking, because that helped him in whatever position they were going to be in. So these people had a mission to fulfill. God trained them from the time they were little tiny, and every one of you, God, we're told, before you were even thought of by your parents, you were already designed. You were already in God's database, and he has a plan for your life. And so you need to think about from day to day maybe you don't want to practice. Okay, maybe you really need to practice to learn self-control. Maybe there's some other higher calling for you that you could look at and think that God called Daniel, and he's calling me, because he's calling every single one of you. And he called Joy. And she looks at it and she's so grateful. I'll let you read this. I'm not very good at reading out loud. So this is a challenge for everybody, young and old. This is our commission. I'm just going to give you one example for the kids. This little girl went to Uganda with a group of Koreans. The Korean church sponsors 50 Bible workers in Uganda. And so some of the church members went over there to visit their Bible workers and to take them supplies and so on. And this little girl got to go along with her parents. And she knit all these little animals here that she was going to take over there to give to some child that probably has never had a toy of any kind. And so she's a young girl, but she got involved with it. And she's also selling these in the United States, and she sells them, and then she buys pads for the girls so that when they mature and they need to have some kind of pads and hygiene supplies, they can stay in school, because that's why the girls drop out of school. If they have nothing, it's embarrassing to go to school, and they're shamed, and so they don't go to school. And Farm Stew does that too. Last year we gave, I think, 3,000 pads to girls, and our goal this year is 5,000. Okay, I'm going to sign off here if you would like to come up. Pastor, you want to have a closing prayer or sign? Oh, Denise, are you? Who's doing closing hymn? Okay. I just want you to look at this. Take the time today to think over your life and all your relationships and ask yourself, who does God want me to pour my life out for?